doing this sort of some years by hook and crook and other years not, but you have to make a good pitch to these committees. There are a lot of people that want their money.
And we can and we will work up a schedule to prepare for the 19 budget, and we will reach out to those of you that would love to attend and come with us. That would be great.
Dave?
That was the question I was going to ask, is what we were going to do with the money that is available from the city once they stop running the in-towner. And I think that's a great idea, but we really have to market that. Yes. I've always felt like the residents in Channelside were this tremendous untapped market that we have never reached. I mean, the ridership out of that residential group has been dismal, and there's no reason for it. If those people know that it's there, and I'm afraid they don't know it's there, or they just haven't, it doesn't register with them how convenient it could be. And here's a suggestion for a marketing piece, is that we have a laminated schedule. When I lived in Channelside, I had the schedule with me, and I could stay in my condo until I knew the streetcar was going to be there. And with a 99 point whatever % on-time service record, you can go there 5 minutes or 3 minutes at a time and expect to see the streetcar there. If people knew that, then they would use it more, I think. So please put that in your marketing materials.
Already noted.
Okay, thank you.
And we had started talking a couple months ago about updating our website, and I don't know where that is, but I'd like to hear about that, if not today, next month.
We will agenda that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Will there be any requests for a subcommittee to work with marketing for brainstorming potential ways to reach out to folks? Do you need? We do have a marketing committee, and I think you're the chair of it. Either you, one of you two.
I don't know whether I still am or not.
Well, let's see. I think it's in our minutes here from last month when we did the appointments.
Actually, Vanessa, probably meeting with the marketing committee would be a good idea.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And the only other question is, do you know about how long of a commitment that we can get for the early service? For instance, I know last time when we did the pilot, a lot of the problem with getting people to give up their already existing parking spaces was if they gave it up, they couldn't get it back. And so because it was a pilot and we could only offer it for a certain amount of time.
Okay. So with the in-towner, we never had a formal agreement with the city of Tampa. It was just an agreement, a verbal agreement. We were in the process of creating a true agreement with the city for that funding. What I want to do is once we get to the point where we're preparing for the budget, I will create a new agreement between the city of Tampa and HART and THS, so we can do it in multiple years.
It becomes permanent.
Yes. So we show that, and we have that with a lot of with the pilots that we run outside of the streetcar with HART, is that if you don't have that consistent guarantee that service is going to be there, it's going to be hard for people to not get a car or permanently park it somewhere else. So we will work with them on something to show that there is some sustainability with this program.
Excellent. Thank you.
That concludes my report.
That was a great report. Thank you very much. Direct media report, Ms. Gage.
Good afternoon. We've got a couple of new advertisers. ConnectWise is a nice little account that's going to run through the end of the year. It's a technology company with a streetcar wrap, full wrap, and it's through Shafino Lee Ad Agency. And then we've got just some little streetcar panels. Under Vector Media, though, we have a much stronger national account team supporting us, so that should be fun. We're talking to Anheuser-Busch again, and Red Bull, we're looking to come back in July. So hopefully we end the year, a little stronger than before. And that's about all I have for sales updates. Is there any questions on numbers or anything?
Any questions? I think not. Thank you, Laurie.
Okay. We have questions regarding the changes to the policy, the alcohol and tobacco?
We're about to get to that. We have to vote
Oh, okay.
when we're done with you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Let's move to action item number 4, Resolution R 2018-0503, authorizing us to ask the HART Board to amend the HART policy. Somebody needs to explain that. Hello.
Good afternoon. Sylvia Berrien, Director of Legal Services. Bree coming forward, with this resolution, basically to go before the HART Board, asking them to amend their policies. As requested by the THS Board, we did meet with all the CRAs that support the streetcar, and all of them are in support and have given their concurrence to move forward with the changes to the advertising policy, basically allowing us to basically seek national advertisers for both tobacco and alcohol. So there were a few comments, but overall, all 3 CRAs did approve their support for the amendments to the particular policy. So we would like to take that to the HART Board and ask them to amend the policy for THS and the streetcar.
We're still not going to solicit cigarette advertising, I would assume. Cigarette advertising, I'm not at all comfortable with that. National advertising for liquor makes fine sense. National advertising for cigars, but when we initiated this approach, we specifically excluded cigarette advertising, and we don't advertise for cigarettes, and I'm not comfortable with that.
Okay.
I don't know how the rest of the board feels.
I agree. Okay.
It's
That's
just
information
inappropriate. It's
okay.
just completely
We can remove that. I received that from the general counsel in terms of both the regional for both.
Yeah.
I mean, going national for both of those. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Just cigarettes, you're leaving cigars?
No, I like cigars.
Okay.
I like cigars, and we've always done cigars have always been available to be advertised.
The current policy doesn't authorize cigarettes.
The current policy does not, and I don't want the future policy to.
It only authorizes cigars.
Yeah, cigars only, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, or
So not the open referment to tobacco products. You want it to be specific to cigars.
I think so. I mean, I don't know how the rest of you feel, but it was a big deal when we talked about it when we started this 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 years ago, and everybody was a little nervous about even cigars, and we decided since this is Cigar City and a lot of people smoke cigars, we would do that, and then it was local alcohol, which never made much sense. So I don't know, Jeff, if you have an issue with this or if you do, but I would think it would be national advertising for cigars and alcohol.
Yeah, the way the policy currently works, there's a prohibition against advertising for tobacco and alcohol, and there's a carved out exception for cigars and for certain alcoholic beverages based on geography. And all we're really doing here is expanding from local and regional to national, but there's still no authorization to advertise for cigarettes.
Okay, good. So we're good.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You guys gonna move forward?
I guess we need a motion to that effect.
I'll make the. Well, go ahead. You made the motion. I'll second that motion then.
So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Everybody okay with this?
Yeah, my question is, I want to make sure that it says tobacco products. There are a lot of tobacco products out there that we didn't even know existed until
right, I don't
recently.
want to advertise those either.
So,
cigars only.
So I agree with you. It needs to be very specific, and that's only because we are Tampa.
Yeah, smokeless tobacco products, none of that. I don't want to. We're not supporting any of that stuff. We shouldn't be supporting cigars, but this is Tampa.
David, if I'm correct, I believe the way that it's written, it should be sufficient to support what the board is authorizing.
That's correct.
And I think that Ms. Gage understands where we're after.
Thank you.
We're not requesting cigarettes or nothing.
Okay, good. Okay, good.
I would like to add that when staff came to the CACs, that the CACs overwhelmingly said, we want to support the streetcar any way we can. Thank you for making this opportunity, and they were just very appreciative.
Good.
more funding opportunities. So.
Okay, good. Okay, so all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Thank you. By the way, I do find that the marketing committee has as members English, Ahern, Hamilton, Donahue, and Mechanic. I'd like to ask Ms. Doring Ahern to be the chair of that committee.
Yes, sir.
I'd like a motion to that effect.
I move to approve.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay.
Thank
Okay,
you.
now the stars are
Now we have a chair.
realigned. Okay, so let's move to presentations. Kimley Horn, Old Water Street.
Hi, good afternoon. Troy Newberg. I'm actually with SPP, the Senior Development Manager for the JW Marriott, which we are eagerly awaiting breaking ground on. So joined here with Scott Gildner from Kimley Horn, who's our civil engineer and has been working with us and facilitating conversations.
Now, thanks for coming today.
So we have a short presentation, just kind of an overview of the overall project, and then a couple bullet points, just kind of talking through our coordination with HART and the Streetcar to date. So what you see here is our beloved downtown as it sits today, and over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, we are hoping to transform it into more of a mixed-use, dense, walkable downtown corridor. Our vision for Water Street Tampa, it's over 50 acres in the heart of downtown. We're looking for it to be a true neighborhood, retail, office, homes, hotels, culture, entertainment, and education all on the waterfront. And a big part of that is transportation, and along with the streetcar. Once the full phase 1 and 2 are complete, there will be over 23,000 people living, working, and visiting the development. Have a little graphic here just to kind of show the development over time. So from a timing perspective, this year we actually intend on breaking ground on 2 new projects, one existing, which is the Marriott Waterside. It has undergone an extensive renovation, redone all of the hotel rooms, and later this summer we'll be transitioning into renovating all of the public spaces. In addition to that, the 519-key JW Marriott, which some of you may have heard, we had a groundbreaking ceremony for it 2 weeks ago, and we're actually looking to start construction middle of June. And then our final project that will start south of Channelside is a residential building, 2 towers over a grocery store. And then the remainder of our projects are scheduled to begin 4th quarter of this year or potentially into 1st quarter of next year. This kind of just gives a quick overview of all of the various projects that are being developed. The main one here to speak today about, the JW Marriott, is located right here along the streetcar tracks, and then the condo building and residential building located here is also along the streetcar tracks. One of the things that we're hoping to connect, and as we further develop the project and our platform, mobility is a huge component of that, not only in the sense of cell phones or in transportation, but we're really looking to link all of those together and develop a platform where they all speak together. So we're very intrigued with the opportunity in the future to speak as we get into those details of how we can create a platform that takes technology and integrates it with transportation. Over the course of the last 6 months, HART and SPP have met numerous times, mostly through the permitting process and getting through the approvals with the city and the entitlement. And through that, we've started to develop a relationship and understand safety being a number one priority. And as we've gone through the process, have made numerous adjustments to what our plan initially was based on feedback received from the HART members. The goal of our partnership really is to promote success of Tampa's mass transit and progress design of Water Street Tampa and the JW Marriott for this one project. We've met, this was done 5 times. It's probably been a few more times since then, just to discuss clearances and safety requirements, along with some of the road realignment work that we're having to do associated with the development. As we mentioned, pedestrian, patron, and worker safety during and after construction has been a main area of focus. We've changed many of the signalizations. We've added actually exit gates at the egress from the hotel that will work with the streetcar to ensure that we don't have vehicles crossing the tracks when the cart is coming through. And we've also began conversations with our general contractor, as was mentioned earlier, Coastal Construction, and worked through their plan to make it so that we don't actually have to shut down any of the tracks associated and next to the development, except for a very short period of time when we are erecting a pedestrian bridge that connects the JW to the Marriott waterside. Original plans were we were having to shut down the tracks more frequently, but working with them, we've been able to modify that so that it only has to occur during that one brief time. And then the last bullet point that we had was just pursuant to conversations that earlier occurred, we would like to discuss further how we can interact some of the construction workers and get them to utilize HART's transportation to get to and from the construction site. And that, I believe, is it.
Very nice, thank you. So what's do we have a plan in place? Do we have a construction plan, interruption of streetcar plan that's specific?
I believe that you want to talk to the MOT plan that we have. I'm not sure if that addresses it.
Yeah, I think you're saying construction schedule that ties into timeframes of when. We
were just curious about roughly when and how long the streetcar would have to be shut down in that area. I mean, I don't know that I heard the answer to that question.
Well, so the intent is that it's not shut down. So at first, when we had originally started, we were talking about maybe shutting down the northern segment. However, right now, the plan is not shut it down at all.
Oh, that's great.
Except for when we have to shut down the entire road. So when we have to go shut down Old Water Street from Morgan to, it's probably going to be to Franklin, we will actually shut down, obviously, the streetcar as well. And that's only to erect and basically lower the pedestrian bridge into place.
So what period of time is that?
Well, the schedule's not set on when that exactly will be. We've been working, we've shown some schedules to the HART staff, and we've worked through that. But first we had to get the permit to kind of lock it in, and then I think we're still working through Coastal's plan and schedule as to when that'll fall into place.
But when I mean what period, I mean like a week or 2 days or
a month or
a week or under is what we're shooting.
Wow.
Yeah. There'll also be work associated with finishes with the bridge.
Sure.
One of the requirements that we have is working through the insulated troughs over the lines so that any maintenance that we need to do that won't interfere with any of the service as well.
That's great. And you heard us talking earlier, and I heard you mention at the end, we would love to help you and your general contractor find a way to park a lot of those workers in Ybor and bring them in and not. I think the city's probably very worried too about where you're going to park 3,000 or 4,000 vehicles. So, and I think I heard you say you're talking to HART about that.
Yeah, I'm happy to facilitate the conversations further. If there's a specific contact, I can put in touch with our general contractor who's working through all of those logistics.
There's your man. That's great. Any other questions? Well, everybody's very excited about what you're doing, of course, and we really appreciate you coming. So thank you very much, and we'll look forward to all the progress.
Thank you.
All right. Now we have a streetcar extension study update from that brilliant transportation planner, Stephen Shoecraft.
Michael. Good afternoon, Steve Shoecraft with HDR, working with the City of Tampa on the streetcar modernization and extension project. I think as I was preparing for this presentation, I think we're sort of at a similar place as we were a few months ago when we gave you a briefing on where we stood with the project. So this will be a review of some of the material that you've already heard. We have taken a couple significant steps in advancing the project to position us for federal support for the effort, so I'll talk about that a little bit, and that's some new information for us today. And I have, if we want to drill into the weeds on any specific topic, I've got my notebook, and I should have what I need to support that sort of conversation. And there's a couple of things that we want to focus a little bit on as we talk about that. So this is one of the transit projects that DOT supported, District 7 has supported throughout the region. So they've provided funding along with the City of Tampa to look at both modernization and extension of the service into the heart of downtown Tampa. The city is the owner, working with HART as the operator, as a partner in the project, and HDR is the lead consultant with a team of sub-consultants and specialty consultants that can take us into preliminary design and further advance the project if that's where we end up heading. But we've got the team in place to support that. So as we've talked about previously, this is looking at a transit solution that supports the city's vision for livable, connected, and competitive downtown. The cities use the Envision tagline to connect this back to those previous studies that looked at making downtown a real 18 to 24-hour city, a proper urban destination with quality streets and streetscapes, and the transit supportiveness that allows for that pedestrian activity to flourish across the full footprint of downtown. We're looking at both modernization and extension, as I mentioned. The process looks at cost and benefits and community impacts, and we will be looking at vehicle alternatives to streetcar, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute when I get into the preferred extension option that we've identified. And through that process, we've been coordinating really closely with the regional premium transit. What is it called now?
Whatever.
Regional transit
Regional
feasibility
transit
plan.
feasibility plan.
Yes. So this is an older slide when it was called something slightly different. But the idea is that we recognize and they recognize that streetcar is one of those important first mile, last mile connections to a regional service that could be delivered in the 275 envelope or adjacent to the envelope. You still have to get to the rest of the city, really access the core of population and employment that's going to generate ridership for streetcar and for other services. The phase one project we're complete, and we've sent a request letter to FTA to enter the project into project development. So that doesn't indicate FTA approval of funding for a project. That just moves us into the next stage where they recognize the work that we'll be doing to advance into a request for federal support for the project. So we've organized the scope of services and our work to position the project for small starts funding for the extension, and then the FTA capital improvement grant program only supports the extension. We need to find other pots of money to support modernization of the existing line. So we're looking at both ends of that spectrum to try to position the project properly.
Where do you have to go to find that money?
Well, the ideal program would be Tiger, which is the new build program, which would be a source like that for federal support. So that what we've done, and I'll get into it in a couple of slides, is start to look at how the local, state, and federal share would break down depending on how we start to align the project with different funding sources. So we've started to puzzle through that question. There's a little bit of a moving target right now at the federal level about what programs will exist when we're ready to submit for application. Tiger has been extended through build, at least currently, and that could continue. So we could be looking at small starts with Tiger funding, which has been used for other streetcar projects.
So one last question. So you're at the point of requesting FTA for entry into project development?
Yes. That's the new news, is that letter has been submitted to FTA.
It has.
We've gotten a very simple set of questions that we're responding to this week, and we expect to be we expect to be accepted into project development in the next couple weeks, which is really a simple letter from FTA that says, yes, we recognize your project, that your sponsors are in place, that you've got money committed to move through project development. And so we'll recognize that work to queue you up for application for support.
Okay, there was an FTA person in town last week for the APTA conference, and I had an opportunity to ride in the streetcar with she and Jeff and you and several of Gene Duncan. So was she reasonably impressed with the deal, or do you know, or?
The one thing that I was pleased about is she was very engaged in the discussion that we had during the tour.
Yeah.
She had done a bit of homework, so she understood a bit about the project in advance of coming here. She asked really solid questions about the extension, how that related to existing transit service in the corridor, how it related to the existing system. So I thought it was a productive trip, and it was a really unique opportunity for us because we were on a call with her 2 weeks before. Jeff jumped in and said, could we show you the corridor while you're in town for the conference? And we were able to work that out really quickly.
Good.
So with HART support, we were able to take advantage of her time in Tampa, which wasn't on our, for our benefit, but we were able to take advantage of it to show her the corridor.
So if they say, fine, you can go to the next level, that doesn't give us any more money from them. We have the money to do phase 2.
We have the money to do phase 2.
Okay,
yeah.
That's
one of the things they're looking for. So when we move into phase 2, and I'll backtrack and talk about the preferred alignment condition, we'll initiate another phase of public outreach. So this is sort of a bridge right now between the two phases of work. We're continuing to do outreach and briefings to keep people up to speed with the project. We'll look at a transit mode. So we'll be comparing the heritage streetcar, replica streetcar vehicles to modern streetcar vehicles to some sort of rubber tire option, with the fundamental goal. And I'm kind of getting ahead of my slides. But the primary objective is to provide a one-seat trip across the full alignment. So there had been discussion earlier about possibly splitting the service, running heritage streetcar and running a different sort of vehicle up the extension. And that's not how we're proceeding with the study.
Good.
We think it's really important that that's one seat from end to end, and people can get on and off as they wish, and the quality of service is sufficient that at 10 to 15-minute headways, you wouldn't have to think a lot about the schedule, because you would be there within 5 to 7 minutes of the next vehicle coming to pick you up. So the next phase gets us through a higher level of detail in the laying out of the extension and defining the modernization improvements, the detailed cost and ridership information, impact assessments, and then a detailed funding and implementation plan, where we would be looking for defining carefully the local sources of money, getting those commitments, city, county, and private, matching that to state funding, which should be readily available if the local pot is established. That'll be matched by the state. and then seeking federal support for the project. And it's really, right now, the math is about 50% federal, 25% state, and 25% city, county, private, and other local.
Say that again.
And it's the basic math is 50% federal. 20. Did I say that? I didn't say it right, did I?
Yeah, you did.
50% federal, 25% state, 25% city, county, other local. So assessment, special assessment district, other local sources.
Right. Okay.
And hopefully I have a slide, so maybe I can provide more detail. This is sort of our bragging slide about public engagement. We have the city challenged us early in the project to get out and have meaningful public dialogue with stakeholders along the corridor and around the city. So we've had a series of very well-attended public meetings with a lot of engagement between participants and the team. We've reached out to individual groups and organizations at various levels of formality, but we have participated in community meetings, the CRA, CACs, and other organizations. Stakeholder meetings have been ongoing, and we've had our coordination with the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan team. So the extensions, and I talked about this a little bit, but the sort of basic drivers for the project that we worked through during the first phase of the study is that this would represent an initial phase of investment that would allow for future extensions. So there's a lot of talk about going north up into Seminole Heights, west to West Shore of the airport, looping back to Ybor City to close the loop. Those would all be possible, but that's not part of the current study. It includes modernization of the existing system as part of the full program of improvements. Modernization would include, if new vehicles are introduced, upgrade of power and the power transfer to the vehicles, some upgrade to the stations depending on the vehicle. So if we could go to a low floor vehicle, we could go to low platforms for easy off and on boarding. Some of the curves are a little tight, so we'd have to smooth out some curves. So there'll be some track construction, possibly extending some of the double track sections so you can pass larger vehicles or allow for that passing to be less confined to provide for that 10 to 15 minute headway service. So we've, in our estimates of cost for capital and operating, we've assumed a high frequency service and full day and evening operating hours. So the assumption is it's a sort of 6 a.m. to midnight or 2 a.m. sort of service that covers the full range of potential riders. And that we've used in this stage of the study, that we've used the modern streetcar vehicles and operations as kind of the baseline for comparison of the alternatives. So we just said, if it's a modern streetcar system, here's how it would operate, and here's what the cost would be. So this would represent, our cost that we've worked on to date would represent the high end of the spectrum as compared to running the existing vehicles on an extension or running some sort of rubber tire option across the alignment. So we developed evaluation categories. Some of those align with FTA criteria. Some of those are more locally driven. We looked at 7 alignment alternatives, and we presented these in our public meetings and got feedback on all of them. Some north-south alignments, some looping alignments, and some east-west alignments. We looked at cost, ridership, community impact, population employment served, or existing population employment served, population employment projected within walking distance of the alignment, and compared those. The preferred alignment out of that process was some version of a corridor that ran along Florida, Franklin, and Tampa from Whiting Street or south of Whiting Street north to Palm Avenue. And so this gets us through the core of the business district downtown. It gets us to North Franklin Street, where there's a significant pocket of development potential. It intersects with the Marion Transit Center approximately, and we're the footprint of a regional transit hub. And that study is underway now, or sort of being refreshed now with DOT. District 7 is looking at the intermodal center location, crossing 275 and up into Tampa Heights, and then circling back down. So that's a 1.2 to 1.3 mile extension. The quick numbers, this is based on the existing population employment projections, but it would serve 16,000 jobs and 5,000 residents now, just the extension, not the existing line. So if you think about the Water Street numbers, they're talking about possibly 5,000 residents just in that small section on the existing line. So we are expecting, when the region updates the population employment information in the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Model, TBRPM next version, when they project it out to 2040 or 2045, we expect the downtown numbers to increase substantially. And that data set, the regional population employment information, is what we need to use in the modeling for ridership that FTA will accept. So that our numbers have to come out of the regional model to go to FTA to show them what our ridership potential is. So we've worked with the Hillsborough MPO to try to advance the downtown numbers, so we might be able to use them in our early modeling, and we would expect a significant uptick in that total ridership. The way that we presented this here and in the reports was that the cost for the extension is about a $100 million project, and the modernization is about $70 million. There's some costs that are shared across extension and modernization, so the cost for new modern streetcar vehicles is split up. So we need some to serve the additional distance, and we need some to replace the existing vehicles on the existing system. And some of the costs for the maintenance facility, if this had to be expanded or replaced, those costs were shared proportionally across the extension and modernization. So there's some costs that are baked into both parts of that estimate. But that's based on recent experience and costs provided for streetcar projects delivered around the country. We think it's a pretty good number, and we'll test that in more detail as we move into phase 2. But we wouldn't expect a substantial difference overall as we get into more detail. This shows that breakdown, the way the allocation worked for modernization. The modern streetcar vehicles are very expensive, so it's one of the big hits to the project overall. There's $6 million a vehicle, and we assumed sort of the best available version of a streetcar vehicle that can be federal funding can be used to purchase, and we assumed a vehicle that could run off wire for some stretch of the corridor. So, for example, for the CSX crossing downtown, we could possibly run it off wire for some distance, so we didn't have the wire crossing the tracks. We would just have the track-to-track interface as an example. And then we split the cost for the vehicle maintenance and storage facility across the two. And then when we looked at the annual operating costs, we're looking at about a total of $5 million a year for operations. So part of the puzzle that we need to solve as we move into phase 2 is how we're going to come up with that on an annual basis. So the next steps I talked about briefly. The transit mode evaluation is something that we'll do over the next several months, so we should come back with information about that. We're trying to figure out how to do an apples-to-apples comparison between existing replica streetcar, modern streetcar, and rubber tire. So if you think about rubber tire, a rubber tire service along the streetcar alignment, we have to figure out how to upgrade the existing system to allow for that rubber tire operation. So the ballasted track would have to be reconstructed. We'd have to look at stations and stops. An articulated bus may not be able to turn as tightly as the small existing replica streetcar vehicle. So there's a lot of cost. Rubber tire is not an easy thing to do, to run it from end to end. And we think we're going to run into some hurdles in trying to deliver that sort of service along the alignment. One of the things I should mention, and I should have done this sooner, is in terms of the assumptions about the service, we're assuming that we would be able to run, or we would try to maximize the amount of transit way operations, so the streetcar vehicle is not running in mixed traffic. So it would be an exclusive lane for the transit vehicle. It could be shared with other transit vehicles, which is something that we'll look at a little bit more, but that was one of the notions. So if you think about it running up Florida and down Tampa, that would mean taking maybe a parking lane or maybe a travel lane on a service. to run that in an exclusive guideway, north and south. And then we have to puzzle through the question about whether it fits on Franklin in terms of Franklin's character and how it's developing and developed over time, how it's sort of, one of the challenges with Franklin is those businesses along Franklin aren't alley access, so all their services come from Franklin Street. So you have a lot of service vehicles off-peak, midday, afternoon, early morning, which would be a potential conflict with running along that corridor. So those are things that we'll get into in more detail, and so we'll be able to talk about it more in a block-to-block kind of impact and operations context when we move into the next phase. So schedule-wise, I think, yes, the next slide. So we think we're going to get this on the dark blue column to the left. We think we're going to get FTA approval sooner than July, hopefully in the next couple weeks. So we'll work with the city to start to move into phase 2. We'll announce that schedule and kind of get people thinking again about the project. We've been a little bit quiet for a little while, so we'll be bringing this back into the sort of spotlight. The next year would be moving through the project development stage to try to key the project up for a submittal for federal support. And you know, if Go Hillsborough had been approved, for example, we would be talking about a locally funded project, and this would be a compressed schedule. So there's still some possibility that there's a locally funded project here that we could define that could be done faster, but that's something that we'll need to move into in the next phase. So this schedule gets us, assuming the federal funding, going through the grant agreement process with the federal government, with construction in 2021 to 23, with service in 2024.
Don't hold your breath, right? So it takes a year to get a construction grant agreement. Wow.
Yeah, and that has to sink. I mean, assuming there's construction grant agreement dollars available. So we may know more about that if the rescission package goes through and the money disappears, or we don't know yet. But we do have some folks on our team. You've worked with Jeff Booth in the past, who spends his time in Washington trying to figure these things out and is providing advice to us on that front.
Question?
Sure.
Steve, I always ask this question when you give this presentation, but when do you have to identify where the operating capital is coming from? Or I should say operating money, since that's confusing. I mean, the FTA isn't going to approve the capital funding without your demonstrating where the operating money is coming. When does that take place, and is that part of your process to assist in identifying that operating money?
Yeah, that's part of the work that we need to do over the next year.
And what's the timing on that part?
In terms of, well, I mean, if we're in this project development phase for the next year, so here until next summer, sometime in winter, spring, we'll be trying to pin down that package of support to go with the capital project. The definition of the capital project to cover capital money and operating.
We want to be sure to be included in that thought process. We are the people who've been scrambling to keep this thing operating for 20 years. So don't make a whole bunch of decisions without getting some input from us, please.
And Mike, you'll write a check too, right?
Absolutely. Wish I could.
So I was going to say, the Water Street presentation really brings up the substantial amount of development that's in the pipeline that's going to support and help justify this kind of investment. So as relatively speaking, this is only a mile, 1.2 miles of additional distance, and relatively reasonable amount of money to connect all these growing destinations. And Tampa, given the way it's developed over time historically, is still a little too far to walk from place to place. So a lot of the purpose and need discussion that we had in the reports, and a lot of the ways we're positioning it focuses on as a not just an economic development tool, which I think is obvious to a lot of us, but as a transportation solution and stitch these sub-districts together and make it possible to live, work downtown without trying to fight for parking. So we're in an environment now where parking is still relatively abundant and super inexpensive, from an urban standpoint. And that's going to change over the next couple of years. So we're going to see a really different environment that Streetcar fits really nicely into. Yeah.
Do you have a methodology by which you project future ridership in order to determine operating revenue needs?
Yeah, so it's called the STOPS model. It's an FTA tool that we use, and that's one of the primary inputs to that tool is the region's population employment projections. So capturing all of the changes in development that's happened in that model is really critical. So that model reflects what's actually being committed to now and what the long-term projections look like.
And has that model been calibrated to actual experience in other places?
That's why FTA requires everybody submitting for the same pot of money to use the same model. So even the regional transit feasibility plan uses the STOPS model to generate their ridership information.
Yeah. So if it's bad, at least it's fair, it's equitable.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, we can when we move into that modeling process, we'll be looking at adjustments to the output that we'll have to justify when we submit it that picks up all of the special event venues and destinations and cultural institutions downtown that are going to drive a lot of off-peak ridership. So it's not just driven by the commute trip, but it's going to be a lot of those off-peak trips. And one of the examples that we have is Kansas City, who sees really significant spikes in ridership on Saturdays and Sundays because people come downtown and that's their way to get from place to place. So that's a real powerful model for us to use. We did the STOPS modeling for that process when they submitted for funding. So we're experienced with that system. So we understand how to make some adjustments to the model to reflect real-world conditions.
Thank you.
So it looks to me on your schedule like you're going to hit completion of NEPA review about the time the mayor's election occurs, city elections. So just be sure and dance lightly there and make about your timing.
Yes. Yes, we understand.
It'll be really interesting to see how all the mayoral candidates respond to this, because it's, to people that don't understand the cost of transit, it looks like a lot of money. I mean, it is a lot of money, but frankly, to get what we could get with it isn't a lot of money. Anyway, Steve, this has been a great presentation. We appreciate it. Anyone have any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I live in Temple Terrace, so I may not be following this as closely, but I hear talk of a stadium. So is that part of a scenario somewhere? Is there a what if?
At the moment, our scope doesn't include assuming the stadium as part of what's going to drive ridership. So we haven't baked that into our analysis yet, but I expect we'll be asked to sometime over the next few months.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. If you scroll back 2 slides and you look at the project development map, and I've had this conversation with.
I think the other one's better. Well,
it doesn't matter. But my point is that if the Rays, if it turns out they're going to land on this site, which is 2 blocks from here, there has to be a way to close that loop because then you have a way to be a big city and move people everywhere on the system, park everywhere on the system. And if it's another 60 or 70 million bucks, who cares? I mean, if you can get the money, then you can build it. And then, and I've also made this statement. Steve has to say this is teed up for next projects, and it is eventually. But it will have taken 25 years. If we do this on your schedule, it will have taken somewhere between 25 and 30 years to have conceptualized and built the first streetcar line, done the first little extension, and then gotten the politics and the money to build this extension. So this stuff doesn't happen. It doesn't happen short term. So if we have the chance to get the money, and we got great consultants, and we have a city that's behind it, the Rays could present a big change. And I tried to tell the FTA person that, but her head was so full of wondering where the hell she was that I never got there. But that moment will come, particularly, and I think it really may come. I think that this community may well find a way to finance a baseball stadium.
Well, Also, what's interesting is that it'll overlap with Steve's current time frame.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
we should know by the end of this year. It wouldn't be final, but we would know with some degree of confidence whether it's going or not at the end of this year. So it sort of puts you right in the middle of your finishing touches on the
You could
project.
be involved in this
right?
project for a long time, Steve.
But that's not our goal. We can do it as fast as we can.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say is that as we move into this next phase, it's really important for us, and with the help of boards and commissions and other interested folks, to make sure that people understand that this isn't a competitive project to the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan or Central Avenue BRT in St. Pete or others. This is all complementary, and these are all really important pieces to creating a regional network of transit that allows all of the different systems to work the way they should. So that's a continuing dialogue that we're having with those projects. We all have to justify our projects as having independent utility when we go to FTA for funding, but part of the story about how these stitch together as a region is also something that FTA and others need to hear.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure. We appreciate you. This is a great presentation.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have compliance reports, and now that we have a new marketing director, I would love to have the marketing report be on our agenda as a regular item that she gets to tell us what's going on.
Sure.
Are there any questions about the marketing report? We do have the City of Tampa's Chief Accountant, Lee Huffstetter, here today. Always nice to have you, Lee. And his report's in the back. It looks like we have a little bit more money in the endowment fund, but we're not allowed to spend it, so yes, no. So everything's good. We have enough money to continue to survive. Thank you very much. Anything else to come before us today? If not, thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good meeting.
Good for you.
Thank you.